to my Wandavision episode 4 breakdown. This is going to be a totally different breakdown to episodes 1, 2 and 3 because the episode was completely different. If you've not seen episode 4 yet, go and check that out first and then come back here. This episode was much closer to the Marvel that we all know. It didn't have a sitcom style intro credit. We did get kind of a previously in, but we didn't get any introduction to Wanda, and actually we went straight into looking at Geraldine instead. We had expected to start getting answers from this episode, but it seems like we've just got the questions that all of the fans have been asking, asked by the characters of the show instead. We start with a post-blip Geraldine, who is now confirmed to be Monica Rambeau. She reappears in a hospital room where her mother Maria had been at the time of the snap. If we remember back to Captain Marvel, Maria Rambeau was Captain Marvel's best friend at the time, and Monica was a young child. To remind us of this, we get a voiceover from Carol Danvers, who is Captain Marvel, calling Monica Lieutenant Trouble, which is what she used to call her back in the day. Now, we've had Hulk's snap everyone back moment shown in Far From Home, which was quite comedic, you know, all of the band reappearing amongst the basketball game, but we've never quite seen it from this realistic, almost dark perspective of what would have actually happened as millions and millions of people started to reappear. You can imagine that there are families who have mourned and remarried and then their spouses reappear. It was just going to be a really difficult time for a multitude of reasons for a lot of people. That firmly places Wandavision post-blip 2023, around the same time as Spider-Man Far From Home. The 3-week timeline between Monica waking up and going back to work confirms that Wanda would have only had 3 weeks at most to put this town of her creation together. This makes it feel like a bit of a stretch that Wanda would have been able to create that town, which we find out has a population of nearly 4,000 in 3 weeks, when we see at the end of the episode how long it took her to get that wall put back together. So from this, I feel like it's much more likely that this was a real town that Wanda just took over instead of building from scratch. Back at S.W.o.r.d headquarters, we find out that the blip and Thanos has created a real fear amongst staff there about going out into space. Because of this, S.W.o.r.d are having to move more Earth-based, which is why we're seeing more of them in the MCU now. We then see Monica go to the town of Westview, which we find out doesn't actually exist, although whoever built it went to the trouble of creating road signs to make sure that people could still get there. And then we get Jimmy Woo, who was Scott Lang's house arrest agent in Ant-Man and the Wasp. We get a lovely Easter egg here where Jimmy Woo flicks out his business card in the same way that Scott Lang does in that movie when he's learning magic tricks. Now, Jimmy Woo is an FBI agent who is looking for someone who's gone missing from witness protection. Now, he uses the pronoun him when talking about him, so it's unlikely to be somebody like Agnes, but it could be her husband Ralph, who we still haven't seen yet. Now, I don't want to miss this Easter egg, but I don't really know what it references. I saw the number 1966 on the back of the sheriff's car, and it's probably some reference to a comic, but I don't know the comics well enough to know what this is referenced to, so if anybody does know, please let me know. Monica and Jimmy speak to the sheriffs who are stood outside of Westview, but are adamant that the town doesn't exist. It's almost like they can't see it. Now, the sheriffs say that they're from Eastview. Does this mean that Westview has replaced Eastview? In which case, where did the sheriffs go at the end of this part? 24 hours after Monica is sucked in through the energy field, we see Darcy Lewis. Darcy is an astrophysicist who works with Dr. Eric Selvig and Dr. Jane Foster in the Thor movies. She immediately corrects a misogynistic agent who calls her Miss instead of Doctor, but this is also a great way of highlighting the fact she's no longer a student and is in fact a doctor. Darcy is the one who identifies that somebody is broadcasting out of the town, but why? Once he sees Wanda and Vision in the TV show, director Hayward immediately gets a transport back to headquarters, which strikes me as odd, unless there is something at headquarters that he thinks should be there and now isn't, like Vision's body. Now, there is a theory that Vision's body could be there because before his death he was a sentient weapon, and they would have wanted to investigate how his body worked without the Mind Stone. Jimmy Woo writes up all of their questions on the board. They're not necessarily Easter eggs, but they are the questions that the fans have been asking too. The encouraging thing about this is we were asking the right questions, particularly why sitcoms and why hexagons. The agents then start to identify all of the characters and pin them up on the board. They all seem to be real people with real names and driving licenses based in New Jersey. The only person who doesn't have a driving license or their real name written on the paper is Agnes. Now, this could just mean that she's on witness protection, but surely the FBI would have access to that data, so it's more likely that she doesn't exist in our reality. Back to the whiteboard, we see the word Skrulls, who are shapeshifters, so could be involved. But the question around that is why? What interest do they have? And why would they play along with Wanda for so long? Now, I do think that S.W.o.r.d is seeing more episodes than we are, because they see clips such as when Monica is in the foreground and Wanda and Agnes are talking behind her that we've only seen in the opening credit scenes of some of the episodes. And the dog just kicked me. We see that S.W.o.r.d are sending in loads of drones, and we finally get confirmation that the helicopter that Wanda found in episode 2 was in fact a S.W.o.r.D drone that had been converted in some way to look a bit more friendly. This TV reality seems to do that regularly, because the S.W.o.r.D agent who went in the hazmat suit, Agent Franklin, came out as the beekeeper with a skipping rope attached to him instead of a wire. When Monica references Ultron and Jimmy asks if there's ever been mentions of our reality before, Darcy says no. This makes me think that they're not seeing the adverts that we're seeing, because there's been references to Stark, Strucker and Hydra, and Darcy would definitely have known about that. She would have really been aware of the Tesseract, which turns up in the form of the Hydra Soul, because this is what Dr. Selvig did his testing on. The broadcast obviously contains more doctored versions of the episodes where we were seeing the more sinister parts with the jump cuts. They're only seeing the happy parts. So possibly these adverts were doctored in some way to take out any reference to the outside world. We then see the very end of the 70s episode in our aspect ratio rather than the 70s episode aspect ratio, which makes me feel like we're seeing the reality rather than the broadcasted version. In this part, we actually see Wanda's magic in that red energy form that it normally is in the movies for the first time. She uses that magic for evil to then throw Monica straight through a wall. This is cut from the broadcast version, which is why we only see this in our aspect ratio. Maybe Wanda really is the villain, which is what Monica believes when she lands outside of the force field. We then get the reshot part where Vision comes in and asks Wanda, "Where's Geraldine?" Wanda turns around and this time she sees his creepy grayscale dead form from the end of Infinity War. Now this isn't the same shot as the last episode, because if you rewatch that, he is actually in his red and gold form, but this is in our aspect ratio, so this is probably more like the reality version rather than the broadcasted version. Is it actually possible that Wanda is reanimating Vision's dead body? If that is the case though, how is he having all of these separate sentient conversations with the neighbours? This is more likely just a manifestation of Wanda's grief and guilt, because she dusted immediately after his first death and then came back, although 5 years later in our time, it would have felt like minutes later for her, and she's only had 3 weeks tops to process this guilt. We could be seeing Wanda go through the 5 stages of grief. This could be denial or anger or even bargaining, where she's made a deal with some kind of entity to provide her with this space to deal with her grief. Vision doesn't seem to understand that they can't leave the town. Vision looks visibly uncomfortable and almost scared of Wanda as they sit down to watch TV. Vision repeatedly looks down the camera lens, which he actually did in episode 3 when he felt like something was wrong. His eyes flickered down the camera lens and back out, and people thought that might have just been a bit of bad acting at the time, but it's starting to look like he's almost looking straight down the camera lens as a cry for help. It might be possible that Vision is the one broadcasting this show. We know he's got that power within him from when he was Jarvis and he was stopping Ultron from using nuclear codes, and Wanda might be the one who is censoring it without knowing that Vision is the one broadcasting. Immediately after this episode, knowing that we wanted more, Disney dropped a teaser trailer for their coming episodes, which included a very clear Modern Family moment.
It's probably just a case of the Mondays. Am I right?
There are so many things to pick apart in that, but here are the main things that I noticed. We see Agnes say,
"We just take it from the top,"
firming up the idea that they are actors and they do know what's going on. Wanda says, "I don't know how any of this started," in the voiceover, trying to reconfirm her innocence rather than making her the malicious demon that she seems to be at the minute, but also trying to point towards somebody else doing this to her. We get the tagline, "Life could be perfect when it's made just for you," which reconfirms that somebody has made this place for her. It's not Wanda making it. Vision, in an almost breakdown moment, asks,
"What is outside of Westview?"
which means he realises that he can't leave and doesn't know what's outside of the barrier. The series could possibly end in a fight between Wanda and Vision, because Wanda has turned into the villain. Like I say, there was loads more in that teaser trailer, so go and watch that. So thank you for watching. I hope that your theories kind of align with mine. If they don't, please let me know what your theories are. And I'm really excited, as everybody is, to see the next couple of episodes. Please come be in my video. I am so sorry, sleepy boy. Look at your bed head. big yawns.